Morning. My name is David Burke, and I'm part of the community here at Edges. And as of yesterday, I'm an otter spotter. Anybody know what I'm talking about? We have an otter. Did you know this? We have an official otter of Blacksburg and Virginia Tech. My wife Sarah and I went out to the duck pond yesterday. Gorgeous day for otter spotting, and we were successful. You can go out and maybe you'll see the otter too. I don't know if there's been an official naming. Somebody at 8:30 suggested that the consensus seems to be Otter Sandman, maybe the official name. I'm a dad. I love a dad joke, so I've been referring to the otter, Mr. or Ms. Otter, by its first initials, Y-I. Y-I, otter. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. I know. You can say it again, and it's just as bad. It doesn't get any better the more times you say it. All right, this week we're continuing in our Flawed but Faithful series, in which we seek to find some universal truth in the life of Simon, also called Peter, one of Jesus' 12 disciples. So far, we've learned that Peter lived a simple life, mostly built around his job as a fisherman, until a surprise encounter with a revolutionary, Jesus, swept him up into a life he never imagined. Last week, we heard about Peter's boldness in suggesting that during the middle of a storm, Jesus should call him out from the safety of his boat and out onto the water with Jesus. This week, we'll hear about what God can do with a whole community of flawed but faithful people. We're going to start in the Gospel of Matthew, where in chapter 16, verse 13, we hear that Jesus and the 12 disciples are on a trip to an out-of-the-way place. You can follow along in the Bibles on your table if you like, or you can look on screen. Again, it's Matthew 16, starting at verse 13. And it says, "Now when Jesus came to the area of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, 'Who do people say the human one is?' That, by the way, is how Jesus most often referred to himself, the human one. They replied, 'Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets.' He said, 'And what about you? Who do you say that I am?' So far, this sounds to me like a conversation almost anyone could have with trusted friends who are away together on a trip. 'Hey guys, what do people say about me? Who do they think I am?' Then more directly, 'What about y'all? Who do y'all think I am?' I can imagine dead silence here as the disciples consider what to say. I imagine them remembering at one extreme the miracles they'd become wrapped up in with Jesus, and at the other, the ordinary, everyday kinds of times they must have also spent with Jesus, the ones we don't hear so much about in the Bible. I wonder if they think, what does he want us to say? Is there only one right answer? What do I believe? What do I even believe about who Jesus is? And can he handle my honesty? In verse 16, Simon Peter says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." So it's Simon Peter who steps up and breaks the silence, and what he says is known today as the Great Confession. When Peter names these two identities of Christ, you are the Christ, you are the Son of the living God, he's saying something aloud that Jesus himself hasn't even publicly claimed. Remember, he referred to himself as the human one. So it's Simon Peter in this moment that names Jesus' divinity, his relationship to God the Father, and his role, his title as the Christ, the one who had come to redeem God's people. Then verse 17 continues. Jesus replied, Happy are you, Simon, son of Jonah, because no human has shown this to you. Rather, my Father in heaven has shown you. I tell you, you are Peter, and I'll build my church on this rock. The gates of the underworld won't be able to stand against it. There are a lot of big deal things about that moment. First, Jesus affirms a precedent for God communicating directly to people. This is a way that God can communicate directly to people. He gives Simon a nickname. Jesus promises to build his church on this rock, whatever that means. And he promises his church will be effective. To make sense of Jesus' meaning, let's start with some context. This unveiling moment is likely the reason Jesus brought the disciples on this trip to this out-of-the-way place, which is known particularly for its geology and its religious importance to the Greeks. In this place, it's a mountain, and there's this large stone outcropping, and on that stone outcropping are built temples to various pagan gods. In this dramatic setting, in the shadow of this massive stone, it seems appropriate for the breaking news that Jesus intends to build a church too. I wonder whether disciples heard that news with surprise. Remember, this is the first time they've heard this. Reading the text today, with the benefit of hindsight, it could seem strange that it's only now, toward the end of Jesus' time on earth, that he starts talking about his church. Is that how you'd kick off the church you're building? Or anything you're building? Right before you're about to leave the people you expect to carry it forward? How would the people know what to do? It only makes sense for Jesus to trust people with his church if he's got some way of continuing the conversation. And in this passage, though I read it a little dry, I wonder if you sense some emotion in Jesus' voice as he points to an example of how that will work. Let's try it again. Simon, it works. You know who I am because my Father in heaven showed that to you. See, y'all? I need you to trust that I've got a plan for how this can work. I wonder if Jesus is excited when he gives Peter his nickname. His given name is Simon, but it's here Jesus says, I'm going to call you Rock from now on. Peter, Petrus in Greek, means rock, like the kind of rock you could just pick up off the ground. Then in almost the same breath, Jesus says, I'll build my church on this rock. Here, the Greek word is Petra, meaning a massive rock, the kind you're not going to pick up off the ground, like a bedrock foundation. And the gates of the underworld won't be able to stand against the church built on that rock. So it's in this out-of-the-way place where people of other faiths had built temples on the physical rock that Jesus states his church will be built on something else, something different. But what is that something else? Scholars have varying ideas about what Jesus means by on this rock. Which rock? Is it on Simon, who Jesus nicknamed Rock? Or on the figurative rock of Jesus' identity as Christ and Son of the living God? Or on the concept of God somehow speaking to us in a way we'll call God thoughts? Is there only one true and correct interpretation? What if Jesus meant more than one? Or all those things? Did he mean something else entirely? To make any useful sense of all of this, I think we've got to get creative. We're going to have some fun with this. Let's take each of those interpretations, those three, and one at a time, imagine we're visiting a real church. A church that Jesus has built on one possible meaning of this rock. I've got three imaginary churches teed up for us right now. The church of Simon Peter, the rock, the church of Christ, Son of the living God, and the church of God's good ideas. I don't know if you're with me on this yet, so let's warm up our imaginations before we go anywhere. So when a church goes somewhere, they take a bus, a church bus. Let's start with imagining our church bus. Take a few seconds. Imagine the tour bus of your dreams. Go ahead. Got it? Got it? Okay, now call out, what is an amenity on the tour bus of your dreams, the tour bus we should take around to our imaginary churches? Wi-Fi, okay? Yeah, all the youth, they like the Wi-Fi. What else? Well-ventilated bathroom. Also important. We got the necessities. What else? Hot tub. All right. Now we're talking. Now we're really getting somewhere. I can tell the imagination is starting to go. What was that? TVs. Okay. And? Beanbag chair. Food. Snacks. Anything else? Coffee bar. Okay. Perfect. I like this bus already. I want to get on. Now I'm going to serve as your tour guide. That means I cannot drive. Safety first. Okay. So who's going to drive our bus? Anybody? Celebrities? Luke's driving the bus. All right. All right. And I would imagine Luke, when driving the bus, we need some music on the bus as well. Does Luke get to be the DJ because he's driving? Yes. Okay. All right, Luke, what are we going to hear on the bus? What do you got? I'm putting you on the spot. It's not my fault. You're the driver. Okay. 90s R&B. Okay. All right, we got some fans in the crowd. Excellent. All right, we are having fun now. All right, load up the bus. Here we go. All right, so here's how this is going to work. We're going to take a few stops, and when we get to each stop, I'm going to offer you the tour guide summary, and you've got to listen because you're going to have a question to answer at the end, okay? That question is this: why might Jesus think the world needs a church built on that rock? The particular rock that church is built on. All right, are you ready? All right, pile on the bus. The Wi-Fi equipped hot tub bus, driven by Luke. Enjoy the 90s R&B. Get a snack. Use the bathroom if you have to. It's well ventilated. All right, and we do need to get going because we don't know what time the worship conversation starts at these imaginary churches, but a group of this size walking in late, that's not a good look. All right, first stop, here we go. Welcome to the Church of Simon Peter, the Rock. At this church, they claim Jesus means, my church won't be built on physical rock, but instead on you, Simon Peter. This claim relies on a literal interpretation of Jesus' play on words when he gives Simon that nickname, Peter. Remember Petra? Please turn your attention to the imaginary plaque on the wall. Don't worry if you can't see it from your seat, I'll read it to you. It says, honoring the confidence Jesus placed in his disciple, Simon Peter, Rock, to be a person of great importance, a foundational stone in the church Jesus is always building. So that's kind of the charter of the church. This is how this will work. We'll have the name of the church, a little something about it. I'll continue the tour guide summary, and then you got to think at this point about, why would Jesus want that church? Why would Jesus want a church like that? What could that do in the world? So, if we dream about this church and what it might do in the world, I wonder if it shapes the way people view other people and themselves. Since Peter certainly didn't have worldly qualifications that would justify Jesus' confidence in him, I wonder if the church built on Simon Peter would help us understand that God's ways aren't our ways. That God often calls people into service, whether they feel ready or not, based on some criteria that we may neither use ourselves nor understand. That maybe there's room and a role for everyone in Jesus' church. Now it's your turn. This is the first one. I hope you're ready. Why might Jesus think the world needs a church built on Simon Peter the Rock? What would make that a good idea? What could that do in the world? Call out an answer. Create a community that's open to working together. Yeah. What else? to remind people that you don't have to be perfect. One more?
Because he is faithful and people are that if you go to church on him, maybe everyone will become faithful?
Yeah, so Peter is an example of being faithful, and when people see that, maybe that'll help other people to become faithful. Great. See, y'all are catching right on. All right, so with that, we got to make our way to the imaginary exit. Please, one at a time. There are a lot of us. Please do get back on the bus. Freshen up your coffee, whatever you need to do. We've got 2 more churches to go. Our next stop is, welcome to it, the Church of Christ, Son of the Living God. You may recognize the name as this is one of these are the words that Peter used in reply to Jesus' question, "Who do you say that I am?" This church claims, "I will build my church on my identity," which God has revealed to Simon Peter, who confessed it to y'all. There's no plaque here, so don't bother looking for one. But instead, imagine a banner that reads, Jesus, Founder, Builder, Redeemer. Here, it's Jesus' identity as the Christ and Son of the living God that is the solid foundation for something new. It's Jesus who holds the role of both foundational stone and builder. This idea is further corroborated by a central tenet of Christianity, that Jesus, being one with God, through his death and resurrection, reconciled creation back to God. People apart from God are healed and made whole, making God's presence available to people in a way that otherwise wouldn't be possible. And as I imagine what this church might do in the world, it seems to me like a wide-open, breezy tent full of folks who are weary from the world but are refreshed by the comfort that God's got this. I wonder if this church would see a need for a statement of beliefs. Judging by the banner, their statement of beliefs might be short enough to fit inside a fortune cookie. These folks might put more priority on belief in Jesus' identity, his actions, his words, than on the details beyond that. All right, it's your turn again. Why might Jesus think the world needs a church built on Christ, Son of the living God? Luke says to encourage followers to live more closely to the way that Jesus did, including, what else? We got time, I'll wait. Justice says maybe we can't screw it up. Maybe we don't need to worry about screwing it up if Jesus is the foundational stone and the builder. All right, back on the bus. Here we go. One last stop. Our final imaginary church is the Church of God's Good Ideas, where the sign out front includes building connection, learning to listen. This church claims Jesus means, I will build my church on a close connection between God and people. You may recall Jesus said it was God who revealed Jesus' identity to Peter, exemplifying the foundational principle on which Jesus can build a whole new kind of community, a community he could continue to build even after he'd physically left the scene. What might this church do in the world? I wonder if people might encourage each other to check their ego, to suspend their human thoughts enough to consider that since God is always looking to do new things in the world, we better listen and clear enough space for God's thoughts to prevail. I wonder where or how they'd hear from God. Would it be in prayer? In meditation? With friends in a home group? Outside on a hike? In a conversation with someone whose day-to-day experience looks different from our own? Is that how they would hear God? One last time. Why might Jesus think the world needs a church built on a close connection between God and people? What do you think?
The Bible points to is Jesus, and Jesus chose to be in human form. So with that, everything points to humanity through him. So that should be our first priority above anything else.
Carolyn says the Bible points to Jesus entering into humanity, and the connection there reminds us how important people are, humanity is to Jesus. What else?
Jesus was sent as such to bridge the gap that was being created between God and people as a more human connection, and so to continue that example would be for us to continue to have that connection with God.
Yeah, so Jesus was sent as a way to bridge, as a bridge between God and people, and so in that way, that creates a foundation to build upon, the reconciliation of those, God and people. One more? Sometimes our ideas, absent God, are just bad. All right, we've got to load up the bus one more time for the ride home, and we got a couple more ideas to consider while you enjoy the hot tub. First, we don't have to agree on the details of the rock. And we don't have to imagine Jesus' church because it's quite real. And all of us can be part of it now. Jesus says that against his church, the gates of Hades, the underworld, even death, don't stand a chance. And that means no one is too far gone for Jesus and his church. Even the most strict interpretation of Jesus' words here tell us that Jesus and his church are enough to overcome all. That Jesus and his church will lead us toward life, toward community, toward overcoming addiction, suffering, grief, and all the things that separate us from God. And a generous interpretation of the same passage would say that Jesus and his church will overcome all, for all, always. Let it be so. Amen. Now, friends, I invite us into a time of reflection, but first, in the spirit of confession, as Peter confessed, I will confess now, I was not excited to write this sermon this week. My daughter was home from school all week, sick with the flu. I don't have it, but if you're worried about getting the flu, just avoid me on the way out. It's fine. I just had a hard time getting behind this message. And as I thought about why that's true, I realized it's because I like a call to action kind of sermon. One that says, if this is true, then do that, and God will do this. I like the sense of control that kind of message offers me. But today's message doesn't offer that. Today's message invites rest and assurance that Jesus says it's his job to build the church, not ours. Like Justice said, maybe we don't need to worry about screwing it up. So for the next few minutes, I invite you to consider how we can be part of Jesus' church. Our lead worshipers will come up and play some music while you have some time to pray at your seat, up at the prayer rail. You might add a written prayer to our prayer wall at the back, which Jesus and his church will pray over a couple times this week with you, or by reflecting on the text you'll see on screen. you.